Now let's take a look at some cables. Just a few more cables we're going to talk about here. The first kind of cable we're going to talk about are the data cables. Now this used to be a lot simpler. You can see we have 4 different kinds of data cables here. Just ignore that one for right now. And that would be, if you could see closely on this, you could see that this is what's called an 80-pin hard drive cable. It's a ribbon cable. You can see it looks kind of like a ribbon. And by the blue end of it, this is important, the blue end of it goes to the motherboard. The other end of it goes to the 2 hard drives that you might have on that particular system. One important thing about this particular kind of cable is most modern hard drives, the ATA standard, is going to use the 80-pin cable. It actually only has 40 pins here, but it has 80 wires to transfer information back and forth faster. Now, a little more modern version of that is this guy right here, the ATA 133. And this has, you can see, it's not really a ribbon. The reason for this is because those ribbons block airflow. So now we have these new, kind of more modern cables that are round, and the air can go past them a lot easier. This cable, again, we have the blue end, and the blue end hooks into the motherboard itself and the IDE adapter. The other ends hook into your actual hard drives. Now, we have a floppy cable, and the floppy cable is a 34-pin cable. You can see here that one end of it hooks into the motherboard itself, and then the other ends hook into your floppy drives. I brought this one out on purpose because you can see here this has 2 different kinds of connectors right there. You got this kind and this kind. The reason for this is this kind right here, the old 5 1/4 inch. This kind right here, the new 3 1/2 inch. So this is a floppy cable, and the floppy cable is also a ribbon cable. One last thing I want to show you is this twist. You can see right there clearly there is a twist in this. That twist is for the difference between the A drive and the B drive. Back in the day, people used to have not 1, but 2 floppy drives, and this would accommodate that, having the 2 floppy drives right there. Now, last but not least, we have the serial ATA. This, my friend, is what the more modern cables look like that hook from your hard drive into your motherboard. You can see it's very thin. These red things on the end of it are simply there for caps to protect it in here. You can see a much smaller cable right there that is used to connect the new serial ATA to the motherboard, and this is a lot faster, by the way, than the old type of cable, which is the ribbon cable. So you can see that we have quite a few different kinds of data cables inside of our computer now. It used to be very simple. We would only have ribbon cables, a 34-pin or a 40-pin. If you're talking SCSI, you were talking 50-pin inside your computer. Now, the last one I want to show you is a SCSI cable. This SCSI cable just happens to be a very short one, and most SCSI cables are. This is a 50-pin SCSI cable right here, and this, of course, would go from either a device to another device, or it would go from just one device inside of your SCSI adapter that you have. You can see it looks like a normal cable right here, and they are very expensive. That's why this one is about 4 inches long. Go out and try and buy a SCSI cable that's 6 feet long. Hey, we're talking about a lot of money. Sometimes close to $100 for those. The last, and I told you SCSI was last, but I was only joking. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the keyboard cable. Keyboard cables have 2 different kinds of connections on them. They have the old, if you want to look closely here, they have the old 5-pin DIN. You can see the size of that. And now they have, I'm going to go ahead and come in here close to that. You can see that they have the old 5-pin, and this is how almost all keyboards used to connect to the computer itself. So, the 5-pin, and they have The 6th pin, the new, it's called PS2. So the keyboard would actually connect into here and connect into the computer itself. I can show you this keyboard cable as soon as I wreck some stuff around here. This would be the old 6th DIN. You need to know this for the exam, that the 6th DIN cannot hook into a 5-pin DIN unless you have this handy-dandy little adapter that would go inside of here and then hook into the computer itself. Now, if you go there and you get a new job and all they have is the old 5-pin, you might run the other way because they have a lot of old equipment. That is just a short look at some of the cables that we have to deal with when we're talking about becoming a computer repair technician. We covered the data cables, which have the old type ribbon cables, which, by the way, have a 1 pin on them, which is the red stripe pin, and then you hook that into the 1 pin. You'll see this when we put a computer together, the 1 pin into the red stripe portion of that. And of course, the blue half hooks into the motherboard, and the other half hooks into a hard drive. We then took a look at non-ribbon cables, and that was the silver one. That was the one designed so more airflow can go through the computer itself. And then we took a look at the modern serial ATA or SATA cable, which was the red one, which is a very better way of doing these cabling than the old ribbon cables. We took a short look at SCSI cable and then the keyboard cable, and the keyboard has a couple different kinds of connections. It has the 5-pin DIN and the new 6-pin DIN, otherwise known as PS2. Now that's a look at some of the cables. Let's go now and take a look at some of the ports that are coming out of the back of our ATX motherboard.